technology does not solve everything. I think that a lot of people think it does. I think a lot of people in trials think that, oh, let's throw in this new system, let's do this integration, and it's not always the answer.
On this week's episode of the ClinOps Power Hour, I sit down with Katie Rodammer, Director of Clinical Operations at Click Therapeutics. I got to know Katie over the past year or so as I personally took a keen interest in learning more about digital therapeutics, and Katie has been such a great champion of her community, and I've learned already so much from her. Naturally, when I pinged her about a new podcast we were launching, she was the first to jump in. So today we're going to talk about what digital therapeutics are and the key differences and similarities to traditional drug development, and then dive deeper into what it's like designing clinical programs for a digital product. I always have a blast when I sit down with Katie, and I'm sure today is going to be more of the same. Wherever you're listening, grab a notepad because this one is going to be a goodie. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited for you to be here too. So maybe just to kind of give everybody a bit of background, maybe you could kick us off with a brief introduction on your role at Click Therapeutics and maybe what Click Therapeutics focuses on and what you guys do there.
Absolutely. So I'm the Director of ClinOps at Click Therapeutics. And in a nutshell, we really build and validate mobile apps as medical treatments for people with unmet needs. We have apps for a number of different indications. We have different mechanisms, and we use drug endpoints to test them in registrational studies, just like you would a drug. So as the Director of ClinOps, I am really at the cross section of managing people and managing our trials. And I truly love doing both equally. I oversee about 10 plus people right now and a handful of trials or more, and work cross-functionally with many amazing people at Click.
Amazing. I'm super excited to be jumping into this subject today because I think digital therapeutics is something that not a lot of people really know about or have been close to. But maybe before we jump into that main topic of today's discussion, I always like to ask people when they come on the show, was there an aha moment or is there a specific reason that you got into clinical research and in clinical operations? Like, could you tell us a little bit about that story?
Definitely. Yeah, there kind of was an aha moment. I used to work as a radiation therapist, so I treated cancer patients with radiation. I loved that job, the relationships I made with people, the impact I could have on their daily lives. I moved to Singapore a couple years after college, and it was there that I really branched into clinical research alongside doing radiation therapy. So I started doing things like IRB submissions, writing protocols, obtaining informed consent, and then working with patients to do data collection. When I was moving back to the US, it dawned on me that by working full-time in clinical research, instead of treating maybe 30 people a day, I could work on trials that could impact literally millions of people all over the country. So here I am.
Amazing. I want to zoom in on Singapore. What are some of the biggest memories from Singapore? Did you pick up the language? What were your favorite parts?
I did. So I had to. I treated oftentimes elderly Singaporeans. So I did pick up Mandarin. I couldn't read it. That's very difficult, but I did learn to speak it a bit. And then another good memory, I guess, is I met my husband there. So that's a special story we have.
So cool. So clinical research introduced you to your now husband. That's amazing.
Exactly.
I love it. All right. So let's jump into something that I've been dying to talk to you about. And the people that are listening to this won't know that we've been trying to sit down to talk about this subject now for months. Probably far too long, but I'm glad that we finally get a chance to sit down and talk about it. So we're going to talk today about how to design clinical trials, but also the larger ClinOps function within the kind of area of digital therapeutics. To do that, I think we need to start by defining and maybe giving people a bit of an overview of what digital therapeutics really is.
Yeah, so first I have to say that our website is a great resource for an overview of digital therapeutics and products that we create and the regulatory pathway that we follow to get them approved. You can also see our pipeline, which I talked a little bit about earlier, and see how that we really do span more than just mental health conditions. There are so many diseases out there that have a behavioral or neurological component. So in my opinion, the sky's the limit, and we can try to treat everything we can.
Amazing. And you mentioned mental health there as sort of like a key focus area for digital therapeutics, but maybe for those that have only seen digital therapeutics within that area, what are some of the other kind of areas that digital therapeutics could solve some of those problems?
Yeah. So, digital therapeutics have been around for our company has been around since 2012. And the industry really did start out more straightforward, just digitizing common mental health therapies like CBT. But it's really evolving and becoming more and more about novel treatments, novel neural pathways found in diseases, digital biomarkers, and brand new treatment paradigms. So we're definitely crossing the bridge away from mental health and other behavioral diseases as well.
Okay, perfect. Now, you alluded to I guess some of the development of digital therapeutics and how it's evolved, but what are some of the big milestones that you've seen over your career in digital therapeutics, and I guess Click's experience in digital therapeutics? What's changed over time?
Yeah, I think I presented at a conference not too long ago and kind of walked through the pathways or the milestones in digital therapeutics. I think there's been several, starting from remote studies and fully virtual studies, I think really helped put us on a pathway. I think the approval of Pear's product Somryst is huge. They have a couple other products that are on the market as well that are digital therapeutics. And then we kicked off a study year and a half ago or so, the first fully virtual study for digital therapeutic, one with our partners for depression. So that's been a huge milestone, and we have a couple more coming up, and hopefully good news to share soon.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. So now, obviously, digital therapeutics, it's an interesting field, and it's, for those that are maybe working in a sponsor environment where it's very sort of drug or biologic focused, there's obviously some key differences, right? Like we're dealing here with maybe a piece of software or an app. If we look at developing a digital therapeutic, how does that differ from the kind of traditional R&D process of a drug or a biologic?
Yeah, great question. So formally, digital therapeutics are known as software as a medical device. So they do follow the medical device pathway. I want to be really clear here that just because this is a digital product, but it still is an investigational product that should be treated, with care and according to the regulations and standards out there. So it's not a free-for-all by any means, just because it's an app. And another unique thing is that we're also able to do user research and human factors testing early in the process. So we continue to get constant feedback, and we're able to iterate and improve our apps along the way, which I think differs a bit from the drug pathway.
You mentioned that it's still sort of being classed as sort of software as a medical device. Do you see the regulatory piece evolving? Are the regulators sort of becoming more aware of digital therapeutics? And are there any sort of guidance documents or potential updates coming in the future to maybe address digital therapeutics more directly?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a hot topic with the regulators right now. I think the leaders in this space, including my company, we're constantly negotiating and talking to FDA, educating them about our processes too. So I think it's definitely coming, and there's several guidances out there that can relate, but there is a specific one coming, I believe, early next year, that should more directly impact our pathway.
I'm excited for that. Yeah. So lots of new things coming. And I think, we've seen this ourselves at Montreal when it comes to innovation within the sort of research and development space, within the pharmaceutical and biotech industry as a whole. Sometimes it does take the regulators a little bit of time to catch up a little bit, but it's great to see that digital therapeutics is getting the attention it deserves, even if it's been around for quite a long time.
Yeah, agreed.
So let's jump into more in the clinical operations focus, because I imagine that there's going to be some folks on the line that have sort of been learning a little bit more from your explanation around digital therapeutics. If we're not running it in a sort of traditional, like a drug or a biologic, but it does need to be managed as an investigational product and an investigational study, how does this translate into building a clinical team and ultimately designing a clinical program? Like, could you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
I would love to. And I could take up the whole hour just talking about this.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we have a really awesome team at Click. It's been led and built by my boss, Kathleen Platt, who I owe so much to. We started out as a small group of 3 of us. and have grown to, like I said earlier, 10, 15 people now. So I think what we've been able to really do well is identify people who are passionate about what we do, work in a fast-paced environment, and who really can think outside of the box. So we really just look for a candidate as a whole, and if they have the aptitude and agility to invest their time in us and be successful. From how we run a trial, I would say, honestly, we're set up like most sponsors and CROs, but maybe a little bit leaner from what I can see. And then one area we really focus on is looking for operational efficiencies. And we like to look at the processes of our partners or CROs and really challenge those redundancies that come into a pre-built kind of pharma package for a pharma trial. We really like to pressure test and, is that really necessary? Is it not? Because some of them don't always fit exactly for an app. So we constantly try to educate our vendors and work with them in a partnership to make the most appropriate, streamlined, and effective trial.
And you sort of alluded to something that I think is interesting there, where you're taking maybe a slightly different approach, more iterative, more sort of experimental, which sounds a lot like the sort of software industry, right? Where it's very sort of iterative, agile. Do you think that because Click is focusing on digital therapeutics and there's a software or app component, that you're sort of borrowing some of those concepts from the software type industry? Do you guys see that? Do you draw inspiration from that field?
Absolutely. So we have a very, very large tech team at Click, and we work hand in hand with them. And we have adopted a lot of the ways of the nature of their work, in sprints and things like that. We've really learned to work side by side with them and definitely have incorporated a lot of that into what we do.
And I guess my second question would be, what do you think that clinical operations teams can learn from maybe software development teams to maybe improve the way that they manage clinical trials? You mentioned sprints, which I know all about, but maybe not everybody does. But what do you think, that we can learn from the software development lifecycle that could help us in the clinical development environment?
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's really about not getting stuck in the normal day-to-day that you see. There are problems that arise, there are bugs that arise, and you just have to stop and pivot and just keep moving forward. And I think, in traditional settings, you can kind of get way far down your own normal path until you really have to address that issue that eventually will come up. And I think we're really good about stopping ahead of time and just saying, where should we pivot? Where should we change? Yeah, I think that's the best part that we've taken from our tech partners.
I love that. And I could talk about that all day too. So I'm glad that you cut us off. So now, one of the other questions I had for myself when preparing for this interview was, is digital therapeutics too different from sort of the traditional clinical development process? And does that prevent people that are maybe working in a drug or a biological setting today and supporting and working at a company like Click? Like, do you have to have experience in working in digital therapeutics to be an asset in a clinical team at Click?
I don't think you do. And I think you can't, I couldn't say that that's a requirement because there's so few people who do have this type of experience. Yeah. I think it's more of the heart and the attitude of the person and being able to think outside of the box, but also stick to that framework. But people who can kind of roll with the punches, make adjustments here and there, I think do particularly well.
Okay, amazing. One last question on digital therapeutics, and then I will stop harping on about it. What do you think is next in digital therapeutics? What do you guys see as sort of the future, and how big is Click a part of that future of digital therapeutics?
Yeah, we have some exciting stuff coming up. That's one thing I'll say. And I think it is breaking away from the standard CBT processes, CBT therapies, and just to new exciting treatments that operate in a different way. I think that those can be applied again. Going to stick to our pipeline. That's on our website that you can all pop in and see. But it definitely spans. It can span into cardiovascular, migraine, things like that. So.
All right, perfect. I love that. So I always like to wrap up my conversations with some interesting questions. And I know that we talked a little bit about some of these questions beforehand, and I know you got some things to share. So do you have a crazy story that you could share with us that relates to your field or to your role or a role that you've had in the past, within the kind of clinical arena?
Yeah, so this is funny. Strictly clinical research, no, maybe not. But I did speak to someone recently who is running a trial that they're trying to enroll 1 million people. So just anyone in ClinOps might, get anxiety just thinking about that. It's wild and on a completely another level. So very interested to see how that turns out.
Do you ever see Click Therapeutics getting to that level of enrollment?
I mean, my mind would go to real world evidence, and I think it's possible. But, again, thinking of operationalizing that, a system that could even handle 1 million people, like an EDC, things like that. That's where my head goes. But I think it could happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could happen. The next kind of wrap up question I have for you, and I ask this to everyone, and I always get some really great kind of juicy, unpopular opinion, hot take. So do you have like a hot take for us that you could share as we wrap up today's conversation?
I do, and it might be a bit contradictive since I am in the biotech industry, but mine would actually be that technology does not solve everything. I think that a lot of people think it does. I think a lot of people in trials think that, let's throw in this new system, let's do this integration, and it's not always the answer. One of my favorite books is called When Helping Hurts. It's about a completely different topic, but the concept is really that trying to solve a problem that you don't fully understand can do more harm than it can good. And I think that's what happens when technology is used poorly in a trial.
I love that. Even as a technology vendor, I love that. Perfect. So last wrap up question before we close it out for today. We've talked a lot about how things are fast moving in the clinical arena. There's obviously so many different things going on, like enrolling 1 million patients. How do you stay productive in your role? And, is there any sort of tools or frameworks or kind of methodologies that you use to kind of stay on top of things?
Yeah, I wish I had something enlightening to share. I stay productive because I don't have another choice. I hate having idle hands. And with a smaller team, we wear multiple hats. There's always something to do to help with. And I just like to stay curious. It's a motto that I continue to tell my team. Always stay curious, always keep learning, and pitch in where you can. So it takes a lot of initiative to give someone that kind of freedom, but I think those are the type of people we hire, and that's the type of person I am.
Amazing. And that's when the innovation happens, right? So that's great.
Exactly.
Awesome. Now, just to sort of to put a close on today, I know that, I'm sure that people listening are going to have really enjoyed the conversation, and also just listening to you kind of describe what digital therapeutics is. How do people learn more about you? How do they connect with you? Where's the best place to find information about you and Click Therapeutics?
Good question. I would say my LinkedIn is a good place to connect with me if you would like to learn more. Our website, our company has an Instagram and LinkedIn as well. And you can always just email me, first name, last name, Katie Rodammer at clicktherapeutics.com.
All right. Well, Katie, I want to thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. I think we covered some really interesting parts of digital therapeutics. I'm sure there's so much more that we can talk about. So can I get you back on the podcast soon?
Let's do it. Let's not make it take 6 months this time.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Katie, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And we'll get you back soon. And for those that are listening, please look out for the next episode. We have lots and lots of really great guests coming soon. So we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of the ClinOps Power Hour. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Head out to YouTube to listen to the full episode. If you want to share or download the episode, you can do so. Share it with a colleague or friend if you feel like they'd be interested. And of course, if you ever want to get in touch to be a guest or a speaker on the podcast, feel free to reach out to us at montrium.com. If you want to see other great content, you can head over to Montrium's LinkedIn page or over to our website at montrium.com to see that great content. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we hope to see you on the next one. Thank you.